And then I've been away quite a lot in the last probably 5 or 6 months because I also work in international development, so I'm away quite a bit with that. So I've been in Africa for extended period. I've been in India. This week I just go to Brisbane. It's not. But then the week after I go to Nepal, and I'll be up in Nepal for a few weeks. And I go and I look at projects, in development projects, and both encourage and give advice on what's happening. And I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And I also run a charity called Foxglove Project, which is actually supports women's and girls' initiatives in the developing world. So I kind of get to have this fabulous life, I reckon, anyway. Not everyone else tells me they wouldn't really like it. I just think, why? Why wouldn't you want to do this? It's so wonderful. But some people go, I don't really like the idea of travelling all the time. But it's something that I do really enjoy. At the same time, it's always something you've got to balance with your family and other responsibilities. But today, I was thinking, we kind of had this idea, I think it's called freestyling or something. And what it is basically all talking about something that's a really core belief of each of ours. And the great thing is that Phil kicked it off with this idea about guarding your heart. And I always think if I was going to just give one talk before I, never spoke again, I would talk about this, actually. Because you've got to think about what's been the biggest kind of impact lesson on your life. And for me, this is just probably the thing that most touched me. But back when I was a younger woman, I love the Proverbs. I love Proverbs. Does everyone else here love Proverbs? I really do. I just enjoy them so much. And I enjoy the fact that our faith can kind of be grounded in how do you live this out. And the book of Proverbs is just full of all this advice about how to do life well. And I think that's something I've always really enjoyed learning, and tell me how I can do this better. I loved Chis last week, though, because when Chis followed on from, that's Neil Chisholm, should just say that. I've always called him Chis. Since I knew him when I was 14, he still remains Chis. And his mum still remains Mrs. Chis. Even though I've been married for 35 years and she lives with us, I still call you Mrs. Chis, don't I? And we love each other. It's just like, that's just the name. It's always been your name. But Neil spoke about this idea about intimacy with God. And he talked out of the Proverbs 4, which is the passage that we're looking at. But it leads with, my children, listen when your father corrects you. Pay attention and learn good judgment, for I am giving you good guidance. Don't turn away from my instructions, for I too was once my father's son, tenderly loved as my mother's only child. And it's this idea about Solomon painting this idea that he's giving this advice, not as a grand poobah of experience and this is what you are all, this rule maker. And sometimes I'm inclined to make it rule making. Is anyone else inclined to make it rule making? That's my tendency. If I get some good advice, I'll tend to want to go, okay, let's have the top 5 rules here. And this way that it's presented in Proverbs, it's not like the 10 top rules. It's like, my child, listen, attend to my advice. Let me share my wisdom with you. And when you were talking about that last week, Chiz, it was that really touching reminder for me that the Bible and the book of Proverbs is not a manual, which I can sometimes reduce it to. It is not a manual. It is love letters. It is books of wisdom. It's storytelling. It's inviting us into knowing him, that we may then gain his wisdom and his guidance. And that makes this book incredibly different. When I was a girl, my grandmother was a really devout Christian woman. And she lived with us for a period of time too. And I adored her. I'd say if there was a most important woman in my life growing up, it would definitely be my grandmother, my dad's mum. And Nana died when I was only about 18, so relatively young when I think about it. But Nana wrote every one of her grandchildren a book, hand wrote it. She hand wrote a book, which would be about 300 pages. And in it, I've got my little black book that Nana wrote, and in it she gave me, not her story, but all her wisdom for life. She gave me advice about the scripture. She was into numerologies and how that affects scripture, and she wrote to me about all of that. And it was like a little book that said, listen, my child, attend to my wisdom, that life may be well with you. I think we need to remember that that's the book of Proverbs. It's not a slap you across your head because you're getting it wrong. It's an invitation, which is what Rob said today, to do life even better than we are already. I love the fact the hand of God is the guiding thread behind that book. And he's saying, come on, listen. So as I say today, my child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. This is 4:20 to 23. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Or out of it are the issues of life. Your heart determines your whole life, where you're going. And so the scripture would say, so you need to guard it, because it is taking you somewhere. And I hope you want to go where it's going. That's what I think about with myself. I hope I want to go there. I plan to go there. So that means guarding this heart means this idea about protection. And it also has this idea in it of being active, not passively, just sitting back, but like be on the lookout. What could potentially harm your heart? Because if you let it, it's going to take you somewhere. I think of the metaphor that came to me even when I was a lot younger, and I've used it a few times. It's honestly no revelation here, but it's the thought that always comes to me, and that is I think about it like a fort. I'm also a really bad drawer as well as a bad dancer. So, just have no worries about that. I hope you can identify this particular element, whatever it is. Anyway, so what it is, hopefully you can tell. What is that? And what's this? See? It's so bad, you don't even know. But this is a fort. I needed you to do that, didn't I? But this is a fort. And on this fort is the idea that I always get, is this idea, okay, let the lid off that one too long, is that we are on the lookout up on here, watching for whatever can actually harm our heart, which is hidden inside. Like, guard it, because out of it are the issues of life. Because where it is going is where you are going. And when I think about it, I think, how often do we not ponder? We talk about being brokenhearted or we get hard-hearted as if they're just little options in life. But they're not options. They're the main game. Weapons, as you and I are in that fort with our heart there, there's weapons out here that actively seek to harm this. I mean, I think about a fort and I think, the obvious ones are when they, I love those movies. I used to love those kind of movies, which has kind of been reproduced in the Lord of the Rings type of thing. But I remember some of the older style. But it would be the idea of the men throwing those ladders, those rope ladders, and then climbing up to kill the people inside. Or there'd be the big ramming. They'd run up with those big ramming, post and try and knock down the drawbridge doors. Or you'd think about the catapults being flung. And those weapons are obvious. And those weapons that can come into your and my life are like anger. Broken romances. Like we know that could hurt me. Right? We know that there's some out when you see them, they're like the catapult coming, and you're thinking, my gosh, that could really damage me if I let that take heart. In fact, really damage me, that I'm done for. But there's some weapons that seem to be so harmless. They're so harmless. Like, what's the big deal? And for me, the other weapon I used to quite enjoy watching was, when you see miles away from the fort, you could, or probably not miles, quite a distance, you saw a line of archers. And they would line up with their bows and they'd pull them back. And there was often quite a coordinated approach where they would say, fire. Sounded so gentle, fire. And this arrow would come whistling through the air. And if I was standing on that lookout, I'd probably be thinking, I've got a bomb coming at me. You think I'm going to wave at this little arrow? And wouldn't you know it, it just penetrates. And you can die within a minute if it hits you in the right spot. Or it can actually penetrate and take root and become a poison that ultimately takes you out. But I've come to the conclusion that there's a particular arrow that looks so harmless, which I see devastate people all the time. And I wonder what you think it would be. But for me, one of the biggest dangers is the arrow of offence, taking offence. I think it seems such a small thing when you take offence at what someone has said. You know, offence is this idea that it's just a resentment, a little resentment that you can take in from a spoken word or action. And you think to yourself, what's the big deal? I just won't speak to them for a little while. It's innocuous. And I almost think once you've said that to yourself, you've taken the poison. You've taken the poison. You think you can deal with it whenever you choose, but you just don't know what happens to that arrow because it seems to wind its way so deep inside until later on you can't remember what it was about. But it's taken root. You know, it's the world that you and I live in every day. Every day. You know, someone says that really loose word to you that you think, what? How could you say that to me? When someone overlooks speaking to you, that you think, what do you mean? You didn't tell me first. What about when you think you see someone in the street and they ignore you? Or you think they ignore you? The truth was they didn't even see you, but in your mind, they turned away from me. Have we all done this stuff? I really hope someone else has, because otherwise I'm a really, broken little person. But I've had all of those things happen to me. You know, when you ring someone and then they say, when you hear in the background that someone says, can you call Julie for me? And you hear in the background, tell her I'm not there, you know? And you're like, what do you mean tell her I'm not here? I've already heard you say that. You know, there's just so many everyday opportunities to take offence. And may I just say, I think people are just doing it all the time. All the time. I think we get angry, we feel betrayed, we get confused, we want to retaliate, we want to justify it. And then here's what Proverbs says. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offence. It's to your glory to overlook it. There's these two things. I think this idea of man's wisdom gives him patience is this idea that doesn't mean you never do anything about some offence that's happened. Doesn't mean you don't have to sometimes address it. Like sometimes you've got to address it. But your wisdom gives you patience to wait for the right time, to go with the right heart motive, to have already let go of the sting. And then if you can, it's to your glory if you can actually just overlook it. I heard that when I was a young woman. I was in my early 20s, and I heard this actually at a church teaching, midweek. And, I heard it, and it was such a gift for me. It was a gift because my personality is the type that would, make judgments and, I think I need to do that, and then I'll always want to work something out. So, but my idea of working out is I'll come and tell you. Do you know that you just did that to me? It's unacceptable. The poor person would be thinking, first of all, you don't even know if I did it deliberately. And secondly, you've totally put me on the back foot where I've got to feel I've got to defend myself. But when I heard this, a man's wisdom gives him patience. And right that week that I heard that teaching, I was teaching phys ed at Hollywood High School. And I've probably told you this story before, but again, it's been one of those impacting things for me. I was teaching phys ed. And it was a Monday afternoon, and I always go down the Oval on a Monday afternoon. I was teaching a class down on the Oval of Year 9s. And I had another male teacher who would be teaching at that class the same time as me. And him and I were always down on the Oval together. This particular day, he'd gone up early. I was still down there, then closing our two classes off, and then I walked up to the office. And as I was walking into the office, I heard him saying to all the other office staff, about 6 staff, Kelly never does anything on Monday afternoons. She just sits around down on the oval. She lets her classes go a bit wild. I have to do everything for her. And he's having getting this little opportunity while he thinks I'm out of the way to have all this little say about me. And I was a second year out teacher. I was like incredibly motivated. But I remember hearing this, and everything inside of me wanted to just charge in there and give him my, full barrel. And as I heard it, I remembered this thought. It's a man's wisdom to have patience. It's a man's wisdom to have patience. It's to his glory to overlook an offence. It just gave me that capacity to think, I don't have to be offended by this. I don't have to. He's saying what he's saying, and I can talk about it and address it. I don't need to carry this. It was such this liberating moment where I realised I get to choose to do that every time. What an incredible gift. Sometimes it can be big or small, and sometimes it can be public or private. It can be intentional or accidental, but later on the incredible thing is you don't even remember what it was that can often separate friends. Proverbs also says, an offended friend, once a friend is offended, is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate with locked bars. Isn't that the truth? Once a friend is offended, once you've been offended, boy, you're hard to win back. It's almost like the gate's locked. The bars are pulled shut. And the idea is stay out because you're not welcome here. I've watched offence separate friends for a lifelong. I've got good friends who are now at my age. In fact, I saw one of them last Monday night. We're 50, all 58. And she has a twin. She hasn't spoken to that twin for more than 20 years. They were close. The two of them are some of my closest friends growing up. And one of the twins has decided she's offended, and they have not spoken for 20 years. They always had great plans to travel on their 40th birthday. Their 50th birthday, didn't even see each other. Not only does offence separate friends, it actually separates generations. I see generations separated by the offence taken by one family member against another years before. I laugh about going to our Christmas parties when I was a girl, because on the way to the Christmas party, I'd often say to Mum, "Oh, Mum, who aren't we talking to this year?" And Mum, without even thinking, would say, "We're not talking to this person." So, Mum, stop doing this. It's not great, is it? But also, it actually traps us. Our lives become contracted and smaller because we're fearful of what could happen if we let other people in. And we're suspicious because every time we hear our name mentioned in a conversation, we're thinking, are they saying bad things about me? Because somehow this insecurity goes along with this idea of offence. I'm a mother of sons who are not always the most thoughtful of creatures. And, young men, they don't think about you at all. They're off doing their thing. And you know what? If you let yourself, you could be so offended. Of all the years I've done things for you, all the years I've provided for you. The funniest thing is it sounds like me at times, But, of all the things, and then you think, where are you when I need you? When I just need a little bit of encouragement. I have to know deep inside, I love them and they love me. And I will not take offence when they don't turn up to something or they don't call me on my birthday. I will not take offence because it is not intended. These young men are a bit self-consumed, and the day will come when they will see it differently. Until that day comes, I'm going to believe the absolute best about them. And then when the opportunity comes and the wisdom comes, I get a chance to say a few things. They're very kind, as I would be now. But I can still say a few words. I don't have to be silent, but I'm waiting. I've got a few things to say to one son right now. It's been a long period of patience is happening in me. But the truth is, I know if I speak out of turn here, I can actually hurt. I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that. Because nothing is worth a barring of the gates with my son. Coming into Christmas is the reason I guess I wanted to talk about it, because it seems to be a season when it's so easy to feel it more than others. A friend, not a good friend of mine, but a friend of mine just this last week told me about she'd been to she's an older person, and she'd been to an extended family gathering. And at this extended family gathering, a number of things had said by one of the family members who she thought she was very close to, which really, really was an arrow, right? So during this last week, other family members had come over to try to find out what the story was, basically, and then to say to her, are you going to be okay? And she said to them, I thought, I'm not telling them anything. So here she is not telling her family members anything, but then I'm close by. She decided she's going to tell me. It was really quite lovely. She just told me that something had happened. She said, you know what, Kelly, I know if I repeat that, I can divide the family. She says, I'm not going to. She says, and then I've got to think about, is it something I'm worth talking to that person about? And she said, I don't think so. I think I'm just going to let it go. And I said to her, you know what? If you can, it's to your glory to overlook it. But if you can't, you can still talk about it when the time is right. Now, this woman is not a Christian at all. I just thought she's a woman who stands on the lookout and says, I'm not going to let that arrow take me out. I've lived a long life. I've learnt some stuff. And it was just such a beautiful thing to hear, a woman who was refusing to do that. I love the fact that the metaphor that or the phrase that we often say for offence, have we heard it, is to take offence. Have we heard that, haven't we? So, I'm going to take offence. That when you hear about that, it actually gives a really right picture, because it actually says it's an offer. It's an offer. Do you want to take the offence? Oh, yes, please. I'd love that. That's what I think we most often do. When the offence is someone does something wrong to you, do you want to take offence? Oh, yeah, that's lovely. I'll take that one. The truth is that we're all running around taking offences everywhere. But we actually have the other offer, which is, no thanks. I don't want it. I am one of those people who tries to go to a very small bag on a regular occasion, like a handbag. I try to go to a very small bag, and then over time it just keeps growing until now I've got this massive bag again. Looks like I could go away for a weekend with it. And the other day I was looking in this bag. I just can't believe what I've picked up. All the things I've taken. I've now got a cosmetic bag. I don't even use cosmetics. Anyway, I've got one in there. I've got in there, CD. I've got in there my USB container. I don't know why you need a container when I have Dropbox, but nonetheless, I've got all these things. And I realise I've got to empty the bag. But I think most people carry a bag of offence, a backpack. They just throw on the back. And every time an offence happens, whoop, let's throw that in. And I don't think we understand the burden of carrying it around. There's a burden of carrying it around. But I think we can choose no. We can choose no, not only to offence, to any form of revenge, to retaliation, to bad wishing, to saying things like, oh, well, you'll get yours, karma. I don't think Jesus deals in any of those variables. I think our choice is just to say, no, I actually don't want to take it. I don't want to take it. I don't want the arrow, and I don't really want the repercussions of it through myself and my family. Margaret Whitlam, we all know Margaret Whitlam, don't we? There's a lot, okay, a few knows. Okay, my generation knows Margaret Whitlam. And Margaret Whitlam was married to Gough Whitlam, who was our Prime Minister, who was the biggest issue in our last 100 years of politics was when he was pushed out of power in the 70s. And when he was pushed out and when he was taken out by a decision, it caused a huge ripple. And you would have thought, if I was married to Gough Whitlam, would you not have felt offended for your husband? Please tell me we would have, wouldn't we? And you would have thought, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to be telling everyone about what happened, and I'm going to make sure there's some punishment coming. And I love the fact that they said what Margaret Whitlam did when she left Kirribilli, which was she left the lodge, which was the house where the Prime Minister lived and where she had lived. She wrote a letter to Malcolm Fraser's wife, Tammy Fraser, welcoming her to the lodge and telling her I hope she enjoys the years there as much as she had. And apparently that became a tradition then, that Prime Minister's wives would write to future Prime Minister's wives. I'm thinking a woman who took a potential offence and said, I don't want it. No thanks. I'm not carrying this around for the rest of my life. I think she had a few issues with John Kerr, by the way, but let's not go into them. But so, look, I just want to finish by just saying, you're going to have to practice this. Not taking offence, you can't just go, oh no, I don't think I'll do it. I'm not going to do that anymore. If this has been a pattern, you have to understand it's a pattern for most of us. And the opposite is you've got to practice not taking it. I love Philippians, 1 Corinthians 13, because here it is as the picture of not taking offence, really. It's just one application of it. And I had this read at my wedding. Did anyone else? This was a real wedding thing we read years ago. I think people still do it. But I love this idea of 1 Corinthians, which says this is what, because you've got to practice love over offence. And it says this, love is patient. Okay? It waits, it pauses. Love is kind. It does not envy and it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonour others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices with the truth, and it always protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, it always perseveres. If you practice that, you can't take offence. Because I think of the first thing, if you practice humility, that idea of not self-seeking and not taking records of wrongs, like you've got to practice. So often when someone has done something to me, I think to myself, does anyone else? I would never have done that. It's outrageous. I would never have done that. And then I think, oh, actually, you did do that, actually. I can remember the last time I did do it, if I think back. The truth is, of course I have. Of course you have. Maybe more recently than you remember. Someone else has been potentially offended by you or me. This idea of humility says, I'm going to practice being humble about this. You know, the best place to practice is on the roads. It's a fabulous practice place. When I am driving along and I have got, I don't know, there's a lot of idiots driving Perth roads, if anyone doesn't know that. But I've got to practice not saying that too. But as I am driving, and yesterday I had to do it again, but it's so good for me. Because a young woman, she slid across 3 layers of traffic to kind of, get off at Osborne Park. And she just, slid across. And, one side of you wants to say, are you an idiot? And I thought to myself, I've done that so many times. That's what I say to her. I've done it so many times. Maybe you haven't, but I have. I'm not even going to think about it. And then I gave her a toot because, I didn't actually want to get hit. I gave her like a little nice toot. Toot, toot. And then toot, toot. She glanced around. She kind of had that little glance. I smiled. No gestures. No response. I just smiled. Don't worry. Fine. We'll all do it. She drove off. And as I drove away, I thought to myself, gosh, that feels a lot better than the opposite. Work yourself into a lather. There's lots of ways to practice that little bit of humility, and remember, I do that. I've done it far too often to judge someone else. And maybe there's examples in your everyday with someone at work who really distresses you. Practice humility. Practice it. If you've got a family member who this year, turns up late, thinks the whole world spins around them, and then leaves, anticipate and think, how am I going to practice being humble here? Because I'm not going to take offence, and I don't want anyone else to either. The other thing that I've actually really always tried to do is practice optimism. Love always believes the best, hopes the best, believe the best. Sometimes I get surprised at things that people do because I'm so anticipating they're going to do it right this time. But I'd rather do that. It's not about not being realistic and being prepared. It's actually also having a think, you know what, this year it could be different. This year we could have a really great Christmas catch-up. I don't know. It could happen. I run this charity called Fox Club, and there's a woman in another charity, and I met her at a funding event. And I thought we were friends. I don't know. Maybe I just think she's going to like me. But we got there. I thought we actually had a great little conversation, and, it was swimming. And so the next time I saw her, I was kind of like, oh, hello. And she just basically looked at me and went, oh, walked away. I thought, oh, I don't know what. I thought, and I honestly thought to myself, oh, she must just be having a bad day. Don't worry about it. But then we were at some other event, and at that event, when I got up to speak, she left the room. And she kind of did the whole, huh, and walked out. I was like, oh my gosh. So then I saw her outside and I said, hello, how are you? And she was clearly not wanting to talk to me. And I was thinking, I have no idea what's happened here. I've got no idea. But I thought, I've seen her on maybe half a dozen occasions since. Every time I see her, I say, hi, how are you? Hope your thing's going really well. Well, the kind of response from her is it's decreasing. It's decreasing. And then I saw her actually just this last Wednesday at something, and she didn't speak to me, so I didn't go that high. I'm not pitching it that high yet. She didn't speak to me, but later on during the event, she did glance over and gave me a nod, and I was like, nod to you too. And then I noticed she'd gone in and liked our Facebook page. I thought, there you go. I do not know what's going on there, but you know what? I'm optimistic. One of these conversations, everything's going to be well. What I'm not going to be is offended by it. I'm not. Because why am I going to carry that around in my little backpack? If one day she tells me something I've done wrong, then we'll work it out. I'm happy to work it out. But I think offence is just something you don't want to carry. In fact, I think we need to just practice letting go. Practice letting go. Most people practice taking offence, but we can practice the opposite. In fact, Scripture, Proverbs says, he who covers an offence seeks love, but he who repeats and harps on a matter separates even close friends. You know, I just finished by telling you this, that and I was thinking about this idea of harping on, like keep talking about it until you think, I think we've just done that to death, but I'm just going to resurrect it to go again, you know, with a problem I've got with someone. And we do that, don't we? We just carry it and carry it and carry it. And I think number one, we carry it is we talk about it. And I was, when we went to England a few years ago and Hamish, my middle son, he got sick. He got sick in Africa, and then he was a bit sick when we got to England, and then but he'd get sick and then he'd get a bit better. You know, you get sick and he's throwing up, and then he'd get a bit better. And when he got a bit better, I'd been trained, just give him a little bit of soup and a little bit of dry cracker, right? So I'd give him his little soup and dry cracker. Wouldn't you know it, within the next few hours, we'd be vomiting again. And I took him to the hospital thinking he might have got malaria. They said, no, you haven't got anything. But the next day I thought I'll go to the local GP in the UK because he wasn't getting any better. And when I went to this GP, it was a guy from India. And he says to me, tell me what you're doing. So I told him how Hamish had been getting better, but then every time he gets a little bit, he gets better, then all I'm doing is giving him a little bit of soup and a little dry cracker. That's all I'm doing. He said, that's the problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, when they're sick, you give them nothing for 24 hours but water. Even if they look like they're fit better by that evening, you say to them, no food. Stay on water for 24 hours. He says, by that point, he says, you've got to starve the virus. I was like, that seems a bit harsh. Hamish wanted a bit of food. But he said, you go home, you've paid a lot of money for this consult, which we had, you starve the virus. Well, I did do it. I went home 24 hours, no food. Wouldn't you know it, Hamish then bounced back and we didn't have another issue. But it made me think about the issue of offence. We don't talk about it for a little while. We kind of starve it. And then I feel a bit better about it. Oh, I don't feel so bad. You know what, remember that time you told me that? I wasn't really offended, but it was, not really great. Before you know it, you whip this little virus back up again. And we tend to carry it and carry it. And I meet people who have carried something. A woman came and saw me once at Riverview. She came to see me and she tells me a terrible story about someone who really did something wrong to her. And I'm listening thinking, boy, that's not right. We're going to have to work out how we're going to talk about this. But then I said, when did this happen? And she said, 15 years ago. 15 years ago. At that point, I thought, you can't carry it. You can't carry for 15 years because the wound in you is like a gaping wound. I think that we have a choice when it comes to taking offence. We actually have a choice. We can simply refuse the offer. And I can actually assure you now that no good thing is going to come from taking offence. No good thing is going to come from it. It may take you out quickly. It may just start a chain of poison that works its way slowly through your system. It may come as a crisis, or it may come as just creating a vulnerability in you that never goes away. I think that's even more sad. When we start to have a fragility from an offence that we've never let go of. Instead, I'm just asking you to consider this really real option, to let go. Practice God's wisdom. A man's wisdom gives him patience, and it is to his glory to overlook an offence. I just think this is God's encouragement to us about how we should live, not from the position of a rule maker and a judge, but as this good father, the one true good father who gives his children his best advice, his very best advice for the days ahead. And may you and I practice it and in that way demonstrate him in ways that are not human, they are divine. Amen.